Hey, welcome everyone. This is Trey Chadlow. It's the 15th of August, 2017. I'm here with my good old friend Fox in the Know. How are you, Fox?
I'm fine, Trey. I'm not sure that I would agree to the notion of being your friend, but I suppose it's just pleasantries, so that's fine.
Oh, well, I like you. Maybe you don't like me, but that's fine.
No,
Um,
David.
so how have you been? You been okay? I haven't talked in a while.
No, I'm fine. Yeah. I noticed you've not really been on Google Plus much, which is I thought was progress. But then obviously I watched your recent hangout where you repeated many of the same sort of objections and probably gave up any hope that you have actually potentially used that time to maybe move your arguments on a bit. But I guess it's not really happened.
That's Trey for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I apologize. I'm not on G Plus at all anymore, so I couldn't send you a message. I had a hard time getting the link.
That's fine.
I don't know how to even do that anymore. Anyway, yeah, I did a hangout. I don't even remember his name, with a guy named David, I think, and we discussed and we talked about B theory time. I named this for a hangout on time theory, but actually I went back. I didn't even look at it. I thought your first question was something about God's free will and his simplicity. Is that what you were really wanting to talk about?
Well, I'm happy to talk about both things. I guess there was two threads going on, two things that I kind of pointed out that I had issue with. So we can talk about both if you want. I don't know how much time you want to do. It's probably around an hour. It's usually
I got an hour at the max. I got an hour because I've got quite a bit of work to do. But yeah, we can shoot for that.
Okay.
Well, I'll let you drive the conversation because I'm
okay. Well,
that's exactly what your objection was.
So the idea is that presumably that you think that God has free will in a kind of Thomistic sense, I'm assuming, which I suppose still implies the idea that God, in choosing to create the universe freely, had the potential to do other than he did. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't. And this is
so. Does God have a free will then?
No, and I think the question I asked you is, what do you mean by free will? And then
yeah, and you never really said that. So if you want to say God doesn't have free will, then that's fine.
Well, it's a kind of a loaded term, and I think you probably agree with this. There's got to be a lot of nuance that involves with that. I mean, in the truest sense, there's really no such thing as free will, because if will were completely free and not determined by anything, then it would be for no reason. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree that libertarian free will doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But presumably, you want to say that God had the ability to do other than he did.
No, I mean, all I would say, Fox, on that is that I don't know how free will works in a state of pure actuality, because there is no becoming whatsoever. Everything is pure actuality. So how do you have change in a realm where there is no change?
Well, so the problem is, Trey, I guess, with that I was driving at, and I kind of set a little bit of a dilemma up. So if you want to say that God didn't have the ability to do other than he did in creating the universe, then God's will is necessary. So the fact that God is omnipotent means that his will is necessarily efficacious. So whatever God wills necessarily happens. So that means that the effect is also necessary by logical conjunction, right? That just follows.
No, because if an effect is necessary, then it can't. You're talking about ontologically or logically necessary?
Well, I don't really sure what the distinction would be there.
Well, if it's ontologically necessary, then it's not subject to change. In other words, contingent just means that it's dependent for its existence, that it could either be or not be. Okay, and if something is necessary, then it by definition is not subject to change. And yet we know that this creation that we live in is marked by change.
So would you say that? So hang on a second. So I'm not denying that on this picture there is some kind of entailment relationship between God's will and the universe existing, but it can't be the case that the universe cannot exist, right? Because God's will is necessary. God could not have failed to have that particular will that he did. Therefore, it is necessary in every possible world that there would be a universe, right? Which means that the universe, by definition, is not only logically necessary, but also metaphysically necessary.
And if it were necessary, then it would be God, right?
No.
You can't have necessary being. You can't have necessary. You can't have more than one necessary self-existent being, because that which is necessary.
Well, you see, you're going over a lot of things there. So try to pare this back. Try and think. Okay, so God's will is not going to change. It's fixed because God cannot will other than he wills. Right? You agree with that?
No, I don't. I'm saying you can't even predicate about it, because it's.
Yes, you can.
To predicate about that which is not predication is a category. It's like asking what the number 9 smells like.
That doesn't. No, there is no contradiction in what I just said. Right? God can will to do A, but God cannot will to do B. Right? If God has the will to do A, God's will is necessary. And because God's will is necessarily efficacious, right? By conjunction, A is necessary. There is no world, because God exists in all possible worlds. There is no world where God exists and A does not exist, right?
Well, to speak of possible worlds and necessity is kind of contradictory. Don't you agree with that?
No, because that's where we get a very.
I'm talking about. Did I say necessity? I meant possible worlds.
To speak of possible, that doesn't make any sense. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you're talking about necessary reality, you're saying all reality is necessary, and then you're saying it had to be the same in all possible worlds. There's no such thing as possible worlds.
Right.
So that's what it is.
So then we have modal collapse.
Okay.
But we can still talk about, in a sense, we can still talk about how it would be if it wasn't necessary.
Not really, because you're adding on a category that doesn't apply.
No, well, it doesn't apply, but it doesn't apply because we've actually examined that it doesn't apply, because we've noticed that there is this entailment relationship between God existing and God having this particular will that he has, and there being some particular universe, right? That is the result of that will. So we see wherever we see God and wherever we see the will, which we never see the two things vary, they're invariant across all worlds, because God's will is his existence, and his existence is his essence, right? Essences don't vary. So we always have that will. So God doesn't have free will. And the result of that is that God's willing A means that A is necessary, right? Because there's no possible scenario where there wouldn't be an A. And that, by definition, is what we mean by necessary.
Okay, so are you asserting in the ontology that we experience, the safe oxygen and no as an entity, an ontological being, has the ontology of God?
I'm saying that if these kind of Thomistic concepts cling together and are actually coherent, then and God does exist, the God of Thomism exists, then it looks like the universe seems to be necessary, or at least that's the conclusion. Are you
willing to make an ontological distinction between God and the contingent universe?
Well, we can do that in terms of the fact that they're not identical. But I'm not saying that God is the universe.
Okay, you can only have one necessary existence.
Well, you're begging the question there, aren't you?
No, it's a definition.
Because I'm saying that God and universe are necessary, right? It might be in virtue of the fact that God has the will he has, right? And that, but still, that will is necessary. But wherever there is that will, there is that particular universe that will brings about. So it's still necessary. It's just two different things that are necessary. What I'm trying to get you to realize is that that's a logical relation, right? They're entailed. So when you talk about the universe being contingent, actually on that view, you have a kind of modal collapse, which ends up seeing that the universe is in some sense necessary. So there isn't contingency.
Okay, well,
so that's where your argument fails.
Let me give you my let me give you my my positive argument for that. I'm not saying that that you can predicate at all about the will of God in a realm of pure actuality. In other words, I'd say it's got to be in the realm of mystery. There's no way that we can understand it, because everything that we would think about it would be predication.
Well, I just told you, I just predicated quite easily and just showed you the result of that, and I didn't see any contradictions in that. And frankly, to say that it's in the realm of mystery is just a, you know, come on, it's just a cop-out, isn't it?
No. That's where reason leads you to necessarily affirm mystery, because pure act
doesn't. It just did it. It didn't lead me to do that. It just led me to show that there's a problem with your argument.
Yeah, but you're not the sharpest knife in a drawer.
Well, clearly, when I've actually laid that out there, and you've not been able to demonstrate any contradiction, and I just laid out the entailment relations, and then you accused me of not being a particularly sharp knife. Well, unfortunately, you're a rather rusty spoon. I don't think you're not even in the drawer, Trey. But I don't actually think you probably understood what I said.
Oh, that's probably
it may even have been. I think it probably has been said to you before. But you again, if the escape hatch is it's a mystery, we can't predicate about these things. Well, clearly we can predicate.
Is there such a thing as mystery, Fox? Does mystery
God
exist?
wills the universe. In what sense? What do you mean by mystery?
If you have pure act, can that ontology be communicated?
Yeah,
this is really simple, but I know you're the smartest person in the room right now, so I want you to tell me about it.
If by purely actual you mean something which is devoid of potentiality, then I understand what pure act means.
Okay, can pure act be communicated?
Yes, because you just communicated it to me in language.
No, it can't be communicated because the very act would be a becoming in and of itself. You get that?
But the act is you're talking about concepts which describe some presumable states of affairs. It doesn't mean that the concepts or the language used to describe those states of affairs needs to somehow replicate those states of affairs.
You can't. You've got to use analogical language. Thomas is not as stupid as you imagine. I can assure you.
Well, there is a problem there, and I don't see how appeal to analogy gets you anywhere, because we understand. Well, but this isn't an analogical issue, right? We understand what the definition of free will is.
No, we don't. We do not.
On Thomas's account, yes, we do.
No, we don't.
Well, why does Aquinas have a particular definition of free will then?
You cannot speak of. He has a definition of free will, but not on the account of that which is pure act. How exactly there is such free will or predication?
So in that case, that just means that he doesn't know if it's the case that God has the ability to do otherwise or not, right? But that's just an epistemological issue, right? That's still a dichotomy. That's still a choice between either God has the ability to do otherwise or he doesn't, right? It's as simple as that.
No, it doesn't, because your predication about that is predication. In other words, it's potential by definition, and you're potentializing about that which has no potential. You see that? It's a category error.
Well, look, Trey, the potentiality, I can accept that the concept of pure actuality is devoid of potency, right?
Okay.
But when we're talking about, which seems to imply that God has no free will, and he doesn't have the ability to do otherwise.
Not like us. It's not like us, I can tell you that.
Not like, well, obviously it's not like us, because we presumably would have the ability to do otherwise, although that becomes problematic if actually modal collapse is the case. But let's just stick to God for the second.
Because we are both act and potency.
Well, we can get into that at a later point and what that actually means. But for the time being, Trey, I'm trying to get you to focus on something that's actually quite simple, which is you are agreeing that God does not have the ability to will B over A, right? He can only will A. That's just a limitation of God. But you also accept that God being omnipotent means that A exists necessarily, because in any possible situation where there is that will, there is A. Okay.
No.
Now, the only way you could potentially get around that would be to some kind of appeal to, well, maybe in some possible worlds, God holds off from enacting his will. Well, that's problematic because, of course, you hold to divine timelessness. So that means that there can't be any actual holding off of willing A. Wherever there is a will to do A, timelessly there is A, in a sense. So we keep getting back to this. How is it the case, okay, that A is contingent and not necessary, right? You just appeal to, well, because what was it you said something about? Well, because it's not identical to God, God is necessary, and there's only one way that something can be necessary. But I'm just demonstrated to you how it could be the case that A is also necessary. So unless you want to beg the question against me again, which you did earlier, that's not going to cut it, is it?
Okay, but you would agree, would you concede that the contingent universe is not ontologically necessary in its being?
No, I wouldn't say. I think that, again, that's begging the question, isn't it, to say that the universe is contingent. What I'm trying to say to you, Trey, is that if certain conditions hold about God and his will, then the universe would be necessary because of a kind of logical conjunction that holds between the will of God, which cannot vary across worlds, right? Because his will is his existence, and his existence is his essence, because that's how divine simplicity works, an atomistic picture. So what I want to know is how you get around that. And you've not actually said, all you said is, but you have to agree that things are contingent. Now, I can understand how and why you would think things appear contingent, but we would just be in error on this view.
Well, actually,
what I'm being contingent is not contingent at all. It's because it's all a causal conjunction, right? That causal conjunction is the effect of a divine will, which necessarily had that particular will and couldn't have been any different. And there was nothing that could prevent it. There was no time in which it could hold off from coming into being. So everything being in conjunction, in a sense, becomes necessary. You have modal collapse. You have no response to that.
Okay. Okay. In this realm of where God is, the way God is ad intra, this choice that he makes, is it marked by potentiality?
Well, we've just agreed that there wasn't a choice.
Okay, but did the universe happen?
The universe, in what do you mean by happen?
That it went from a state of non-being to being.
It would necessarily have happened.
Okay, so it happened. That's my point.
But it happened necessarily.
Okay,
even if we accept that there is such a thing as temporal becoming on this view.
Okay, so it happened. So there's predication there, right?
Happening is predication, yes.
Okay, so
willing is predication.
So in the mind of God, there was predication for the creation of the universe, right?
There was a necessary. What do you mean before? What does that mean?
Well, you said it before it happened.
Well, but what does that even mean? Okay, isn't it the case that
that's my point?
Co-eternal. Like, how would you in virtue of what is this even a cause, right?
Okay.
Because it seems like it's more like a logical relation than a dependency relation than a cause.
Okay, so we've talked about this, I think, before. What to you? What is time?
What's the relevance of that question?
Because we're talking about potentiality, we're talking about change, we're talking about.
Well, I don't think you can necessarily. I don't think that time is. I don't think temporal becoming is real. I don't think it's an objective part of reality.
Well, how do you measure time? How do you understand such a concept yourself? You don't know what the ontology is, obviously.
Well, I would posit some kind of ontology of temporal parts, maybe of stages. I mean, that's how eternalism gets around it. That time is an extended dimension of a kind of a four-dimensional space-time manifold. We don't seem to have the same problem with what is space. What we do have, obviously, a disagreement about what space is. But yeah, time and space are kind of inextricably linked in some sense, and we can measure time by looking at, say, the rate of difference between temporal parts or stages or something like that.
Yeah, so you're measuring movement, you're measuring change among contingent reality, among that which is.
Again, this is begging the question that these temporal parts or temporal stages, if we were to go for a B theoretical view, would be contingent, because again, they would. It doesn't really matter what temporal ontology you employ, as far as I see, because they are still necessary, right?
Okay.
They're a necessary effect.
Is this necessary creation dependent upon God to be?
If it's a logical dependency, it's an entailment relationship, but you might as well say that. Well, you might as well say that if God has that, God's will is as dependent on the existence of the universe, right? Because wherever there is a universe, there is God's will in every possible world. So you have this kind of.
We don't have possible worlds. You can't use that type of language.
Yes, you can. Of course, you can. Even if every possible world eventually leads to modal collapse, you can still use possible world semantics.
I think it's a wasted category.
Well, you don't understand it. That's why, because you're still stuck on this medieval.
I'm not into the chrome and plastic. Yeah.
Yeah, you obviously not even really into Aquinas, because you don't seem to understand how there is this view. Now, it might be that someone a little bit more versed in Thomistic philosophy would have a way around this kind of modal collapse.
I have not experienced a challenge yet, Fox. Not yet.
Well, you've just experienced a challenge whereby you've been reduced to personal insults, or to laughing and chuckling, or to begging the question.
That's what I do when I get in the spot.
Your inability to even recognize what an objection is legendary. So I don't find that remotely interesting. And people can watch this over, and they can talk to me separately if they really want to get a bit more of an idea of where I was going with this. But it's quite clear that you've failed to meet this challenge. Now, I set this in the YouTube threads, and you obviously didn't respond to it, because I think you realize that if you respond in text, that it becomes that much easier to pull apart your nonsense. But no,
I didn't even bother to read it, Fox.
Well,
I like doing Hangouts, because this is more
problematic.
The text will disappear, but this will not.
Isn't it problematic, Trey, to say that you don't read objections and that there are no objections? Doesn't that just make you look ignorant? Because there could be really good objections that have been made to you in text, and you've not even read them.
Text
Doesn't that just make you really stupid?
Because text disappears, Fox. Text disappears.
Hangouts
do not disappear.
Hangouts are not necessary beings on your view, are they, Trey? So they can presumably evaporate just as easily as text. But I've certainly never deleted anything that I've given to you, and I'm pretty sure you could probably find it. Or no, I'm not saying copy and paste it and input onto your hard drive, and then read it later and come back to me. You don't have to do it in any particular time.
That's not how they work, and that's why I hate the gaming that goes on.
That's how I work, and these are my objections that you say you don't read. So that doesn't.
Well, I'm not saying I don't read any. I just didn't pay much attention to it.
You don't pay much attention
because I didn't consider it to be a serious question.
Well, exactly. How can you not consider something to be serious if you haven't even read it? That's just ignorance, isn't it? That's just pure.
Well, no, I mean, I read it, but I didn't contemplate it much.
Well, because obviously you didn't understand it, because you've not been able to show where it's incoherent. Okay, you've not been able to show any kind of contradiction.
There's no predication with God. Write that on your forehead.
I don't know why. Well, people seem to predicate about God all the time. Now you might want to say.
No. I'm talking about ad infra, not extra.
You might want to say that God, being divinely simple, does not have like properties and things like that. But
not
again,
properties that are different from his being. I mean, he is the perfection of what he is.
But that's fine, because everything I've said has been predicated on the applicability of divine simplicity.
Yes, right? but the creation is not God. That's what you're. At no point
have I said that or inferred that. At no point have I said that. You've not presented any argument.
No. You said it's necessary.
Again, you're begging the question.
Yes,
it is. On this scenario, it is. And you're begging the question to say that it can't be, because only one thing can be necessary, because I'm proposing something else.
That which is necessary cannot be acted upon. Can you be acted upon?
Why can't something which is necessary be acted upon?
Because it's contingent upon the thing that acts upon it. This is what drives me nuts. It's so simple.
But nothing is contingent, because everything that acts upon it is also necessary. All of the causal relations are necessary.
No, they're not. No, it's just that everything that you experience
because there is. Do you not think? Would you not agree, Trey, that all causes are conjuncts of a kind of a shared causal process that leads back to the first cause?
Yes, they're all contingent. Yes. That's right.
So then there is a conjunction between that first will, the cause, right, that you want to call the cause, although I don't know what it actually is a cause, and rather we shouldn't think of it more as a logical relationship, and what it is entailed, which is this causal chain, right? So actually, when I'm acted upon, or whether I act upon everything else, everything is necessitated, right? Everything is necessary. There is no way in which you could have a possible world where those things don't happen, or where there's any kind of variance or difference, right? Everything there is necessary.
Well, there's no such thing as a possible world if it's all necessary.
Well, I'm not necessarily invoking like a modal realism. I'm talking about this as a conceptual framework in which to understand what we mean by the terms possible and necessary.
Well, it's just icing on the cake that's unnecessary. I mean, it's not parsimony to sit there and say that.
What do you mean? What has the principle of parsimony got to do with this?
By saying that there's possible worlds when you're speaking of reality being necessary, is like, well, why would you bring that in? There's no reason.
But I'm not invoking actual worlds other than this actual world.
Right. I don't by necessity, it's necessary. So to talk about possible worlds is like saying,
right. But we can still talk about what we mean by necessity, right? When we apply these concepts and we realize, oh shit, suddenly these other apparently possible scenarios are in fact impossible. They're logically impossible. What we get is modal collapse, right? So you have this modal framework, which then collapses to this one actual possible, which is the actual world. And you realize that the actual world is actually necessary because of it being produced by this necessarily efficacious effect, which in itself couldn't possibly have varied in any other way. So again, this is where the necessity comes from, right? It's in virtue of that the universe is necessary. And the most robust way, I think, pretty much we have in philosophy, and I think if you were to talk to people like Ed Feser or Eleanor Stump, is it, or whatever it is, you know, these kind of, they would also agree that this is the best framework that we have to discuss these ideas of necessity.
I'm not a big fan of Eleanor Stump.
Well, sure. Okay, well, whoever, obviously not R.C. Sproul because he's a bit of a Dumbo, but someone
he's really owed you time and again.
Who obviously is a bit more involved in this, will probably accept this. Now, he might have an objection that I'm not aware of, and then that we can, you know, someone who maybe watching who understands that. We can
I imagine Ed Feser would agree with me.
I'm pretty sure he would not come up with the same nonsense that you've come up with. I would hope not, because he's not actually. Well, I won't say anything too cruel there, Trey. But I think you seem to be backing away from this idea of how I'm actually passing out necessity, right? Now,
what have I backed away from? I've never even.
So what does it mean to be necessary? What does it mean for something to be metaphysically necessary? What does it actually mean?
It would be self-existent. It would have to be self-existent by definition. It could not pass out of existence. It is necessary. It could not be It could not be characterized by potential in any way. That's what necessity is. And I know you're the smartest person in the world, but
you keep running a lot of things together there. So you could probably want to slow that down, Trey, and unpack that, right? So you go back. So necessity is self-existence. What do you mean by self-existent?
It is not dependent upon anything else to exist. It does not have change in it whatsoever. It is pure self-existence. And so if something were to act upon it, it would be contingent upon that which acts upon it.
You just brought contingency back in. So again,
no, I said it can't be contingent. I'm saying if it did.
But what you mean by contingency again is something that you would have to unpack.
So it would be dependent upon that which is acting upon it. Contingency entails dependency.
Contingency entails dependency, but not all dependencies relations entail contingency.
I would say so. It's right? In their ontology.
Well, no, because like I just said, if you have a necessary relationship between, say, two necessarily true propositions or something like that, then that isn't a contingency relationship, right? That's a logical relationship.
That's different. That's logical. I'm talking about ontological.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is that this is more akin to a logical relation, right? Because you have this.
No, we're speaking about beings here.
Universe. Well, yeah, but truth supervenes on being, doesn't it? So you can't just get away with it and say, oh, well, all the propositions look like there's dependency relationship between them, but the dependency relationship don't hold between the beings which make those propositions true, right? Because that means you're going to reject something like a really fundamental thesis, which I don't think you want to do. So it seems that you have two beings here, let's say, just for simplicity, God and universe, right? Now, God and universe exist. Now, you want to say that there is a dependency relationship that holds between one and the other, but is irreflexive, I think is the, if I remember my dependency relations. But actually, it seems like it's a reflexive relationship, because you don't get, in any scenario that you can conceive of, one without the other. No. Right? So that by definition is a reflexive relation.
No, if there's a reflexive relationship, then God is not ase.
Well, in that case, then that just adds to the incoherence of your view.
No, it's not.
Can you tell me in any possible scenario you can conceive of where there isn't that reflexive relationship between the two beings, the universe?
No, because it's definitional. It doesn't, again, possible worlds is useless.
You can't just escape to definitions. I'm talking about how that definition breaks down, Trey.
That's right. What does it mean to be ase?
Well, it means ase means that you can't be affected or overcome by anything else, right? That's probably a crude way of putting it, but you still see that there is that relationship between the universe and God, in which case you never get a universe without God, right? And that particular type of universe. So that relationship there appears to be reflexive. Now, you want to say there is an irreflexive relationship.
Let me ask what you mean by reflexive.
What you want to say?
Reflexive, do you mean like there's a causal relationship, or are you talking about a reflect where there's give and take both ways?
It's a dependency relationship, right?
Okay, but does it pass one way or both ways when you say reflexive?
Well, it would pass both ways, because
okay, that's the problem. No, can't. Because then if that which is ase is acted upon, it's not ase.
But clearly, it would appear that it does, Trey, in any scenario that we can think of, because we don't have, in any scenario that we can think of, one without the other.
Because, but you're assuming all contingency is all there is. Ontological contingency. So, I think you went mute there.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm not assuming just contingency. Again, you're begging the question. These two things could be necessary, because what of all the reasons that I've just sort of spent the last 30
Okay, but necessity entails not being able to change or to be acted upon.
I'm not saying that either of these two things actually change.
Did God actuate the universe?
In what sense do you mean
in this conversation of what we're discussing?
In virtue of what did he? Because all I'm saying is, when you look at the scenario, you've got universe and you've got God, and there seems to be a relation that holds between them, so which is reflexive. So you could just as easily say, did the universe actualize God? But obviously you would say no, because God is purely actual, right? God doesn't have any potency.
It's not what I would say. It's what logic tells us.
That's not what logic tells us, right?
Oh, really? So contingency can exist in and of itself because it's self-existent, but really it's contingent.
You see, this is where you jump away from what I was trying to talk about, which is quite precise, into just gibberish.
Well, it's not gibberish.
Can you break that down for me then in a coherent sense? Can you go back over what you just said and say actually remotely?
If you want to say that self-existence, or that contingency is self-existent, then you have to use...
What's contingent in this scenario?
That which changes.
What changes?
Any movement whatsoever from one state to the next.
How does the necessary...
When I make you mad...
Conjunction of causes, in what sense does the necessary conjunction of causes actually change?
Could you say it again? I'm sorry.
They're all necessary, so and they all, let's say, exist...
Okay, then if everything is necessary, then change is an illusion.
Okay, so that's just sort of the problem for your viewpoint, isn't it?
No, because you look both ways when you cross the street.
Well, hang on a second. No, I think you're getting into something else, something different there. I'm talking about from the perspective of whether or not the universe is necessary. Then actually, the idea that the universe changes...
Well, change must be an illusion on your account now.
Well, not if on on my account because I'm not a theist.
No, you're
But if I
assuming
was a
position though for argument's sake.
Yes, but on that viewpoint, hang on a second. What's up? Yes.
Sure, I'll be back in just a sec. Oh, he's got to cut out for 5 minutes. Shucks. I don't know how to do this. There will be a 5-minute break while Fox takes care of something at home. I don't know if I want to sit here or do something else. I think what I'll do is I'll just put this on hold. Put this on hold, and when he comes back, I'll come sit back. Okay? It'll be just a few minutes. Sorry. Okay, it's been like 10 minutes. I don't think he's gonna come back anytime soon. I've got a lot of work to do today, and I was only gonna go till 3 anyway. I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm gonna go ahead and shut this down. And I imagine we'll probably pick it up again where we left off another day. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you later. Have a great day.